Welcome back to the deep dive. So I want you to just picture something for a second. Imagine you're on the highway, things are moving pretty fast, maybe the road is a little slick, and then just instantly, with absolutely no warning, that line of cars in front of you is no longer a line of cars, it's just a wall of compressed metal. Total chaos. This is the reality of a multi-car pileup, a chain reaction that just erupts out of nowhere. And these things, they're almost always triggered by this cruel combination of factors. You've got bad weather, you have super low visibility, or, and this is the most common one, just simple human error made worse by tailgating. So we got a bunch of sources detailing the physics, the hazards, the prevention, all of it. Our mission today is to give you a shortcut to understanding how you can spot the danger before it happens, and maybe more importantly, what the real fallout looks like if those dominoes start to fall.
And that ability to anticipate, that's everything. We've gone through traffic safety analyses, legal case studies, emergency management reports. We're going to cover how one moment of inattention can set off that lethal domino effect. We'll also get into the consequences that go way beyond just, property damage. We're talking chemical spills, severe brain trauma. And finally, we'll try to untangle the legal mess of figuring out who's actually at fault when a dozen cars are involved.
Okay, so let's start with the physics. We all see these images on the news, but they're not just one big messy crash. The sources we have really help break down the anatomy of it. They identify two main scenarios based on where the energy comes from.
Exactly. The first one is what we can call a pileup from the front. This usually happens when you have a long line of cars following way too closely. So the lead car suddenly slows down or stops. Now, every driver behind them tries to brake, but because that gap is so small, the reaction time gets delayed for each car down the line. It compounds.
So it stacks up.
It stacks up. And even if everyone is slamming on their brakes, that delay basically guarantees that the line's going to compress and someone's going to hit someone.
So if the four cars in front of me each needed, say, half a second to react, but I only left a 2-second gap in total, the crash is already inevitable before my foot even finds the brake pedal.
That's the core concept. And the second type is the pileup from the rear. This one is usually started by a single, massive, high-energy impact, often a really heavy vehicle like a semi-truck.
Right.
Just plows into the car ahead of it at high speed, and that initial energy gets transferred violently car to car to car until the force finally dissipates. It's an instant, brutal chain reaction.
And of course, these things rarely happen on a beautiful sunny day. What are the factors that really combine to trigger these events?
It's almost always a perfect storm, really. It's where driver error meets bad conditions. Our sources consistently point to poor weather and reduced visibility as the #1 amplifier. Fog is just insidious. It stops you from seeing brake lights ahead until it's way, way too late. Rain and snow, well, they obviously increase stopping distances because there's less friction.
Massively.
Yeah, and studies show that even a driver who knows the 2-second rule, they often fail to account for the fact that you need 3 or even 4 times that distance on a wet road. So you think you're being safe, but the physics say a collision is guaranteed.
That's a really powerful point. The failure is often a miscalculation of physics, not just, being a lazy driver.
Precisely. And then you throw in the human behaviors that make it all lethal. Tailgating, which just removes your reaction time completely. Speeding, which increases the impact exponentially. And of course, distraction. Texting, eating, whatever. It prevents you from reacting instantly to that sudden stop. Highways during rush hour, they're the highest risk zones because you have high speeds and high density all at once.
And this is where it gets pretty dark, but we have to talk about it. A huge pileup is so much more dangerous than a normal 2-car accident. The risk just multiplies. What are those high-stakes consequences that really make these things so traumatic?
Well, the first is the severity of the injuries. That's the primary danger. When you're in a chain reaction crash, you are subjected to multiple impacts, often from opposing directions, in just rapid succession.
Multiple impacts?
Yeah, think about it. In a normal rear-end collision, your body moves forward, then snaps back. In a pileup, you might get hit from behind, push forward, and then immediately get hit again by the car in front of you being pushed back into you, or from the side.
The forces are just coming from everywhere.
Exactly. And that massively increases the risk of severe injuries, like major fractures, internal bleeding. But the big one is the risk of traumatic brain injury, or TBI. Your head and neck just can't handle those multi-directional forces. It leads to far more complicated and severe brain injuries.
And on top of that, you have secondary hazards that start cropping up immediately.
Oh, absolutely. Fires and explosions are incredibly common. You've got all this crumpled metal, fuel tanks rupture, and all it takes is one electrical spark to ignite everything. And then there's the risk of hazardous materials. A truck carrying toxic chemicals gets involved, and suddenly you've created a toxic zone for survivors and first responders.
Not to mention the environmental damage.
A huge problem. And the logistical dangers are just immense. A pileup completely shuts down the road, which means emergency services can't get in easily. It delays critical care.
Right.
But the sources really emphasize the huge risk of secondary collisions. Because of all the debris, maybe there's smoke, the road is curved. Approaching drivers just don't see the wreckage until it's too late, and the crash just keeps growing.
And we also have to touch on the emotional side of this. It's a mass trauma event. The psychological wreckage must be immense.
It is, and it's often overlooked right after the crash. But the consequences are profound. We see diagnoses of PTSD, long-term anxiety, depression. But what the sources really highlighted for these kinds of events is something called survivor's guilt.
How does that play out in this kind of situation?
Well, it's that feeling of, walking away with minor injuries when there's so much suffering and chaos around you. Drivers struggle with that why me question, or just the trauma of witnessing what they witnessed. The emotional recovery can take years and require serious, dedicated therapy.
Okay, so if the potential for injury, fire, and all this mental trauma is so severe, we have to focus on prevention. What is the single most critical, actionable thing you can do to avoid being in one of these?
It really boils down to one word:
Mm-hmm.
distance. The foundation of all of this is just maintaining a safe following distance. The baseline pretty much everyone agrees on is the 2-second rule. You pick a fixed object, like a signpost,
Yeah.
and you make sure a full 2 seconds pass between when the car in front of you passes it and when you do.
But based on what you said earlier about slick roads, 2 seconds doesn't sound like nearly enough when conditions get bad.
You're absolutely right, it's not. The sources are clear. 2 seconds is the bare minimum for perfect sunny weather. In heavy traffic, rain, snow, or at night, you have to increase that. 3, maybe 4 seconds. And if you're driving behind a big truck, which needs way more room to stop, the 4-second rule should be your absolute standard. That space, that's your safety cushion, it's your insurance policy.
And what else, beyond distance, what other proactive steps can you take?
Situational awareness. It's crucial. You have to look far ahead, not just at the bumper in front of you, but 3 or 4 cars down the line to see if things are slowing down.
Get the bigger picture.
Get the bigger picture, exactly. And minimize distractions completely. The second you look at your phone, you're essentially driving blind. And one thing the study stressed over and over was being predictable for the drivers behind you. So that means making smooth, gradual changes in speed, using your turn signals well in advance, no sudden moves.
Okay, let's switch gears. Let's say the worst has happened and you're caught in the middle of this. The legal nightmare begins. I mean, if there are 20 cars piled up, how on earth do investigators figure out who's liable?
This is maybe the most complex part of our whole deep dive, because while you might think the first driver who crashed is totally at fault, the legal reality is, well, it's much thornier. Under what's called the chain reaction principle, there's a general rule. In any rear-end collision, the driver who does the rear-ending is presumed to be at fault.
Presumed.
Presumed. For failing to maintain a safe following distance, and that presumption just carries down the line of cars.
Wait, hang on, let me get this straight. So car C hits car B. Car B only hit car A because car A slammed on its brakes. Car C is still presumed to be at fault for hitting car B, even though B was already stopped.
That's right. That presumption is very strong. So drivers C, D, E, and so on, they often share some of the fault because they were also presumably tailgating or distracted and couldn't stop in time. Figuring it all out is a massive job. It involves police reports, witness statements, accident reconstruction, dash cam footage, anything to determine each driver's little piece of the blame.
And I guess the outcome of all that depends on what state you're in and their laws about negligence. Can you break down the 2 main types, comparative and contributory?
Absolutely, and this is critical to know. Most states use comparative negligence. This basically means fault is divided up like a percentage. Your ability to get money for damages is just reduced by how much you were at fault. So if you're found to be, say, 30% at fault for tailgating, you can still recover 70% of your damages from the main person at fault. It tries to be fair.
That sounds reasonable enough. What's the other one?
The other one is much, much tougher. It's called contributory negligence. It's only used in a few places now, but it is incredibly punitive. Under this rule, if you are found to be even slightly at fault, I mean, we're talking 1% at fault because you glanced away for a second.
1%.
Just 1%. You are legally barred from recovering any damages. 0. Nothing. Your claim is just gone.
Wow.
Yeah. So you can see why the legal fights get so intense.
Okay, let's move from that legal chaos to the organized chaos of the emergency response. When a huge pileup happens, how do police, fire, and EMS even begin to manage that scene?
It takes a very structured, multi-agency approach. They call it unified command. The number one priority right away is stabilizing the site. So police secure a perimeter. They shut down the road, divert traffic.
Right.
Anything to prevent those secondary collisions we talked about from making the whole thing even worse.
So once the scene is secure, who goes in first?
That's when the fire department becomes the tip of the spear for the rescue. They're absolutely essential for extrication using tools like the jaws of life to literally cut people out of the wreckage. They're also responsible for putting out fires and, very importantly, managing any hazmat spills containing fuel or chemicals to keep everyone safe.
And then comes the medical side. We've all heard the term triage, but in a mass casualty scene like this, what does that actually look like?
Triage is really just brutal efficiency. It's about allocating limited resources. EMS personnel use a color-coded tag system to classify the injured based on how urgently they need help and their chance of survival. So the red tag, that's for immediate life-threatening injuries, but, and this is key, for victims who have a high chance of surviving if they get treatment right now.
Okay, so it's about prioritizing who you can save.
Exactly. Yellow tags are for serious injuries like bad fractures, but the person is stable enough to wait a little bit. Green is what they call the walking wounded, minor injuries. And then, tragically, the black tag is for those who have fatal injuries or are already deceased.
That's gut-wrenching.
It is. But the system forces responders to focus their efforts where they can save the most lives.
It's a strategic and I'm sure agonizing
Yeah.
system. And then finally, the cleanup.
Right. Once the immediate medical needs are handled, the unified command oversees the scene clearance. Tow trucks come in to remove mountains of mangled cars, road crews clear all the debris, and then they make sure the road itself is safe before traffic can finally start moving again. It's just a massive, massive undertaking.
So if we pull all of this together from our deep dive, the key takeaways seem pretty clear. The risks are specific. Poor visibility, high speeds, and tailgating. The dangers are horrific. Brain injuries, chemical spills, PTSD. And the prevention is actually simple, but it requires constant focus. Just leave more space and pay attention.
That is the ultimate takeaway. You can't control the weather. You can't control the driver 3 cars back. But you can control the space in front of you. Adjust your speed, look ahead, and maintain that safe following distance. It is your single best defense against getting caught in one of these catastrophic events.
Our sources really laid out the consequences in stark terms: the physical, the legal, and the emotional. And they highlighted that the financial and mental health fallout, especially things like PTSD and survivor's guilt, can last for years, far longer than any physical recovery. So this leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to consider. Given that these pileups often lead to this complex shared liability, where even being 1% at fault can have huge consequences, what does real preparedness actually look like? Is just having basic insurance enough? Or should drivers be actively preparing for the deep financial and mental health fallout, those unseen costs of being even partially to blame in a mass collision? We'll let you chew on that.
Until next time.
Please like, subscribe, and get notified.